Hey guys, this is BJ Barham, and you're listening to Walking the Floor.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senors and senoritas, and welcome to another edition of Walking the Floor. This is your host, Chris Shiflett, saying Happy Thanksgiving. Because I really should have said Happy Thanksgiving last week, but I can never remember in advance of the episode airing when a big holiday is coming. So I'm saying Happy Belated Thanksgiving now. So Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you had a good one. I know that I did. I'm doing this from my hotel room in beautiful Santa Barbara, California, where it's been raining and sunny all day. Love it. So happy to be home. So I hope you're happy wherever you are too. Okay, so since my last episode, I got a couple of gigs out of the way. I played down there at the Rob Machado Foundation. That was great. Played at Mollis Surf Shop. That was great. But don't forget, got a couple more coming up in the beginning of December. One's like next week, or this week, I guess by the time you hear this. December 1st at Revo Surf Shop in Ventura, California, and December 9th at Revo Surf Shop in Camarillo, California. And those are both with my good friend Timmy Curran. So please come on out. I think they're free. I'm going to guess that they're probably free. If they're not free, they're going to be really cheap. Bring your own beer, get drunk in the parking lot, whatever people do at those kind of gigs. It's going to be great. All right. Now, before we get too far into this, let's not forget the reason that this podcast is nice and free is because of our good friends over at Zounds.com. Zounds.com, they're not jerks. They're real musicians. You can bet that if they've got an Yngwie Malmsteen signature Stratocaster in stock, that probably half the staff at Zounds.com has gotten their greasy, sticky fingers all over it, noodling and shrouping all over that neck before they send it to you. So it's probably broken in. Zounds.com. They got what you want. Okay, let's do some interviewing. All right, so BJ Barham is the lead singer for American Aquarium, who are like the quintessential hard-working, blue-collar, road-dogging band. They started their career out buying a van, and they soon hit the road doing like 300-plus dates a year, which is a lot of shows. As a matter of fact, BJ booked the band himself out of coffee shops along the way for like the first 8 years. They got a booking agent now. Anyway, he wasn't in L.A., with American Aquarium when I talked to him. He was there promoting his solo record called Rockingham, which he wrote while he was on tour in Europe a little over a year ago when the Paris attacks happened. Their tour ground to a halt for a couple days, and he sat there in a hotel room, I think in Holland, just writing, and all the songs for this record poured out of him in like 2 days. We also talked about being politicized by touring and the lack of political themes in most modern music. I enjoyed this conversation a lot. This is BJ Barham on Walking the Floor.
When I got home in the summer of 45, not a single
I've been listening to your album the last couple days. It's great, man.
Thanks, man.
Really has like that beautiful, there's like a beautiful melancholy to it.
Oh, it's a bummer record.
I was driving my kids to school this morning, and my 10-year-old goes, Daddy, how come all these songs are sad?
Oh, they're definitely sad. It's a total bummer.
It's good though. There's that thing of like, it's got that heaviness to it, but it also feels good. It's sometimes it's nice to be sad.
Yeah, man, the Beatles wrote all the happy songs.
Right.
I'm here to occupy the netherworld of songwriting. Sad songs just kind of always resonated with me. The stuff that like always made me say, "Oh, that's a really great song," was always just like a bummer jam.
Right.
So it's kind of what I write. I've tried writing happy songs, and they just come off as like not genuine.
What kind of music were you listening to growing up? Do you strike me as somebody that maybe came up through punk rock, but I don't know too much about your personal story.
Not too much punk rock until like the teenage years.
Right.
Like the I guess the formative like 0 to 15 was country music.
Oh, really? Okay.
Merle, Waylon, Willie,
Right.
Chris Christopherson,
Right.
Roger Miller,
okay.
stuff like that. It was what my dad played.
Right.
But then I also, anytime we were in the car, this is before CD players. My family we grew up in lower middle class. We didn't have CD players in the car, so we listened to radio.
Sure.
And so I had to listen to a lot of really shitty like '90s country, right when it was
the Garth era,
the Garth, the
Yeah.
Alan Jackson, the stuff that I still know every word to this
Sure.
day. And,
well, that stuff sounds like Hank Williams compared to what's going on nowadays.
Oh, I remember so many people in the late '90s, early 2000s were complaining about country music and where it was going. And I bet you any of those people, the purist, would trade for Garth any day of the week, man. Because that stuff, it's at least it still kind of had the subject matter. The production was clean, and the shows were very much like a Vegas rock and roll show. But the songs were still kind of there.
Were you going to see some of those bands live? Like, when did you start going to shows?
College.
Oh, okay.
So I'm from a tiny town in North Carolina called Reidsville, North Carolina, and we didn't have music venues. So for me, if you were a musician, you were Tim McGraw. That was there was no in between. Either you worked a job or you were a like monolithic superstar musician.
Right.
Like I didn't know rock clubs existed.
Well, how far away would like a city have been that like what was the closest big city that
Raleigh was the closest, which would have been 2 hours.
Okay.
And so I didn't know that you could go see like independent musicians. I didn't know you could go to a rock club in front of 50 people and watch somebody play songs.
Right.
And if you did, it was at like if we went on vacation, I would see somebody play cover songs at like a beach resort or something.
Right.
So when I went to college was the first dose of, wait a minute, you mean we can go see somebody play guitar and it's free to get in and it's dollar beers?
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, this is crazy. And then the first time I played, I remember the first gig I ever had in Raleigh was at this place called The Brewery. And I played for like 45 minutes and they paid me $100 and gave me a beer tab.
So did you start playing out in college?
I started playing out in college.
So you didn't have bands growing up in high school?
I would have called myself a really shitty poet in high school. Because I didn't fully understand that you could do this for a living. I didn't. It didn't make sense to me.
Were you playing at that point?
Wasn't playing at all. I was focusing on school, and so academics were kind of the big thing, and writing was a cathartic way for me to get rid of all the bad things in my life. All the angsty 17-year-old like she broke my heart kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I got to college, I realized that nobody would pay you to sit in front of a microphone and just talk about your feelings. So that if I added,
that's a tough gig to get.
That's a tough gig, but you throw a G, a D, and a C in there, and all of a sudden you're a folk singer. And so I realized that I could meet people, I could sing songs, I could make a little bit of side cash, and then G, D, and C turned into learning a few more chords and realizing like, man, maybe I should put a band behind this. That would sound kind of neat. And then starting a band. And that came very late. A lot of kids start bands at like 13, 14, parents' garage, total rebellion.
Yeah.
I didn't have that. There weren't enough kids in my hometown playing music for me to start a band.
Interesting. So you didn't have the keg party on a Friday night
Not at all.
Band thing that in high school.
We had the keg party.
Right.
We had the keg party, but we didn't have the band thing. The band thing was when I went to a bigger city, I realized that music could be another element of social situations.
So if you started in college, then was American Aquarium your first band?
First band.
Really?
Ever.
That's amazing.
Only band.
Right.
It's weird. I realize it's a different approach than a lot of, because all my friends, everybody in American Aquarium was in countless bands before that.
Sure.
You know.
And you had a bunch of people early on. Didn't you kind of go through a bunch of member changes?
Owner operators. A guy here who's like, yeah, man, I got a drum kit. I'll play drums with you. And then we play. And I'm like, we should like go on tour. And he's like,
yeah, I'm not really down for that.
Not into that. Not into that. And so like when I started the band, I knew very quickly that the way I wanted to do it, and that was to be like a touring band.
Right.
I wanted to play every night, and convincing a bunch of 19-year-old kids to drop out of college and jump in a van with me. And where are we going? I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
You know?
Yeah, that's good. I wanted you to talk about that because I read that you guys do, or at least early on, I don't know if you still do, we're doing like, 200, 250 gigs a year.
300
type of thing. 300 gigs a year.
From 2010 to 2014, it was over 300.
So, I think this is something I think about a lot nowadays, because when I first started touring, it wasn't that touring was easy per se. I mean, I guess it was hard work, but I loved it, so I didn't think of it as hard work. But it was attainable. And nowadays, when I look at young bands and the way that the bottom has dropped out of record sales, and you don't get really paid much of anything by most clubs, when you don't have a draw, I think it's a lot harder now. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what a young band has to go through nowadays to hit the road enough to develop a draw.
For sure. I think the kind of line in the sand was 2000 for me. Pre-2000, the digital thing hadn't really happened yet, and it was starting to happen, but you could still get signed to a record deal.
Yeah,
you could go play a showcase at South by, you could go play a showcase in Nashville, and there might be somebody, it might be a small label, but they would give you an advance,
right?
And they might put you on tour with somebody or tour support.
Sure.
Post 2000, that really didn't exist. It doesn't exist anymore. So I went to college in 2002, so I'm 32, and I started 2002. I'd been 18, and when I decided I wanted to start a band, I started looking at what it took to, I realized very early on I didn't have the jawline to be a country music singer. I wasn't pretty enough. So it was...
That's what plastic surgery was, bro. Come on.
But it was one of those things where I watched some of the bands I was listening to at the time, which was like the Drive-By Truckers and Lucero out of Memphis. And bands like that were playing 300 shows a year and just touring their ass off. And they were still playing in front of 20 people every night.
Right.
But it was like... That was the only way I saw a bunch of kids from North Carolina who didn't have a chance at like a major label deal could make it.
Right.
And so somehow I talked to boys, because 5-6 of the band have been with me for 9 years.
Right.
So I talked everybody into, let's just put it all in the basket, man. Let's buy a van and let's hit the road. And so we did. And every day they would stop at a coffee shop, and I would get out and I would book 2 months in advance every day.
So you were booking it yourself?
First 8 years of the band, I did all the booking.
Right.
And so we've had a booking agent the last 3 years, and that makes my life a lot easier.
I bet.
But it was a cool thing, because it's like the guy who takes over the business that brags about, I started off as a dishwasher, and then I waited tables, and now I know every level of it. And so like we're still somewhere in the middle realm. We're in that kind of weird middle zone between we're all making a good living, but we're not superstars.
Right.
We're just touring musicians.
Yeah.
And we make
blue collar band.
Blue collar band.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to look back and see those early years, because I know what it takes. And there's a lot of kids that get signed these days or start a band, and they'll never understand like sitting in a coffee shop like 5 hours a day sending emails that are going to get you're going to get told no.
Right.
But on the off chance somebody says yes, you're good, and you're going to have a place to play that night. And so we stayed on the road playing coffee houses and crappy punk rock venues.
Right.
But the thing was,
like no crew. Are you crashing on people's couches?
No crew, sleeping on floors, no hotel rooms.
Yeah.
Really and truly, it was.
But probably loving every minute of it.
Amazing. It was the coolest thing in the world, because at that point in time, here's a kid from a tiny place in North Carolina. I'd never really traveled much, other than going to like Myrtle Beach in the summertime with my family.
Yeah, sure.
So for me, it was a chance to see the country.
Yeah.
And so like I'll never forget the first time we came out. First time we were in LA, we played Culver City at the Cinema Bar.
Oh, nice.
And first time ever. And it might as well have been, Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
I came out, we got a show in Los Angeles. Well, not technically Los Angeles, but right outside of Los Angeles. It's going to be huge.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember nobody came, and we played on...
Luckily, that place is so small.
Oh, it was tiny.
That if with just you guys in there, it probably seems kind of full.
We toured as a 7-piece band.
Oh, really?
The first 8 years. We traveled with a full B3 Leslie rig. We literally were just...
Wait, 7-piece band. So what's the instrumentation then?
The instrumentation with the 7-piece was an acoustic guitar, electric guitar, pedal steel guitar, bass, drums, piano, organ.
Wow.
So we were a pretty big rock and roll bar band.
That's insane.
And we've cut down to 6. We replaced...
Who got cut?
A keyboard player got cut. Well, both keyboard players got cut, really.
Okay.
And we added a guitar player.
Oh, nice.
So we added a guitar
less
player.
gear.
Yeah, a lot less gear when
Yeah.
you're not hauling a Leslie in every night. But we got a new guitar player, and our pedal steel player learned how to play keys.
That's a funny thing about van tours that people need to understand is the sort of politics and drama involved in loading in and loading out.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Like, where the fuck is the singer?
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm grabbing my guitar.
Anytime you see somebody show up to leave for a tour and they've got one of those SVT cabinets, you're like, fuck you.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those things you learn very quickly. When you first join a band, you want to have like the big gear and the nicest gear.
Right.
And then you learn how to like whittle your gear down to like, what's the bare necessity?
Yeah.
What's the lightest?
Yeah.
What can I load in and out?
Yeah.
Hammered?
Exactly.
Or sober.
Because when you're drunk after the show, you just fucking disappear.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we got really good at being a touring band, and we're still really good at, we're still doing over 200 dates a year.
Right.
And we're really good at being on the road. And me and these boys, like, the only way I can equate it to people that don't travel or tour is it's like being in the Army.
Right.
Like, me and these guys have seen some stuff together. Like, I've seen every single one of those guys at their lowest moments in their life and at their highest moments in their life.
Yeah.
And we've kind of been there together for it. Like, their family wasn't there for it.
Right.
Like, we were there for each other for it. And so it's this weird, it's past family. It's like I wouldn't know what to do without these dudes.
Yeah.
And so it's a cool feeling. And it's weird because it's my only band. It's the only band I've ever been in.
Yeah.
So, I have pros and cons. We had some growing pains, but like we're a fine oiled machine now.
Well, that leads me to something I wanted to get to, which was why then a solo album now? Why was this album not another American Aquarium album?
It's a super personal record. It's very much a time and a place record. This record came out of a pretty weird time. Me and the boys were in Europe last November when the Paris attacks happened.
Right.
And we were.
I was touring over there too.
Same
time.
We were right outside of Brussels. We were in Belgium, so we were 45 minutes away.
Right.
And I remember walking off stage and like my phone, I had like 50 missed calls, a bunch of text messages. And I was like, "What is going on?" So we realized something tragic had happened.
Yeah.
And they put us back across to Holland. We had 2 days off, kind of grounded in Holland. And I wrote all these songs. But I realized that I wrote all these songs about the place I grew up. I wrote it about my grandpa, my dad, people I loved, people I cared about. It was a personal record. And so I went to the boys and I'm like, guys, I've got another record done. And they're like, that was 2 days. And I was like, yeah, it's finished. I got the songs, but it's about the town I grew up in and about my family. And so we tried to run a couple of the songs full band and flesh them out like American Aquarium. American Aquarium serves for me as a very autobiographical, like a yearbook, like a chronological snapshot. So you can listen to the last 7 American Aquarium records, and that's the last decade of my life. You know, it goes 2 years by 2 years. And it's whatever bar I stumbled into or whatever girl I picked up on the road, and then there's this arc of getting into a relationship and getting sober and finding happiness, and the road still is the thing that I talk about a lot. But it's funny how the one record that's kind of a fictional narrative piece about where I grew up is the thing that I decided, like, no, this is too personal for the band.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm wondering why the Paris attacks. I mean, like I said, I was there at the same time. My wife had flown over that day, actually, and we were going to spend a week out there on tour. We had another week left, and we were actually about to go to Paris in a couple of days. But so she was going to spend a week out there, and the kids were at home with her mom, and we were going to have like a little romantic week. So she got out there that day, and then all that stuff happened. And then, of course, our tour got canceled the next day, and we flew home. But we were still there for a couple of days, and it was such a dark vibe everywhere that we were.
For sure.
So sad and heavy. And we weren't in Paris, but we were in Italy, and it just seemed, because at first we were like, should we stay over here for the week, like we planned? I mean, we'll go to Rome or something and go goof around. We're like, nah, let's just get home to the kids. There was something about that moment and being so far away from home that made me all I wanted to do was go home. So I'm wondering what the connection was for you that made you write about home.
I did it the same way, except I just went there in a different way.
Right.
My first reaction was home as well.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. We still had 2 weeks of tour left.
Oh, so you finished out the run?
We couldn't have afforded to. We were still at that point where $1,500 a man flights where we got to pay for those guys.
Yeah,
and we were only like 3 days into the run.
Oh, really?
So it was one of those things where I physically couldn't go home, but mentally I kind of checked out for a couple of days and went home. And I think that's where this record came from. And you said it was a heavy vibe. The record's a super dark, heavy look at home.
Yeah.
Like I think we felt the same things.
Yeah.
It's just we reacted to it differently.
Yeah.
And it's weird. A lot of people have asked, why write about home? And like in all the chaos, your mind has to go somewhere. And mine obviously went to the place that I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
And so it's weird because none of these songs are about like, it's terrorist attacks or anything.
Sure.
But it's very much about kind of questioning a lot of things about the American dream and what kind of led to because when I'm in Europe, I feel really weird because a lot of people, all they want to talk to me about is politics.
Yes.
And talk about how...
That's what politicized me.
Yeah.
I was never, I was totally apolitical growing up, even though my parents were pretty left-wing and whatever. But so it probably seeped in there somewhere. It definitely seeped in through, Clash lyrics and stuff like that. But I remember the very first time I ever went to Europe, I was there on this 7-week tour, and every kid that we did an interview with wanted to talk to me about American foreign policy, and not only wanted to talk to me, but I was completely ignorant, and they knew everything.
Exactly.
And that shook me. And I came home from that, and I said to my dad, "What the fuck, man? All these fucking European assholes, they're all jealous of us, and they're all this stuff."
Yeah.
My dad kind of laughed at me, and he gave me this book called Chomsky for Beginners. That I still have. and I read it, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I was raised the opposite way. I was raised an extremely right-wing conservative. My dad's like a Southern Baptist deacon. And so I was raised, college was that kind of thing for me. Going to college and realizing that different people existed.
Right.
And they had different mindsets than everything else that I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
And that they had great points.
Right.
And that I wasn't in the mood to argue right or wrong. I just wanted to get the most information and then make a decision for myself. And then the first time we went to Europe, I'll never forget the first time we went to France. The only thing, the French taxi driver, literally this taxi driver knew more about American government than I did.
I've had great conversations with taxi drivers all over the world
about that exact. It's crazy how informed everyone is on just American policy.
Yeah.
And
because we park our nuclear weapons in their backyards.
Exactly.
So they have to be.
We have this kind of, a lot of people look at this privilege to just kind of be oblivious, and it blows my mind. But anyway, this record kind of is my, it's not a super political statement because, but it also talks about how the lower to middle class blue collar families in America are getting cheated. They're the ones that are paying the ultimate price for, because the people that vote for the Bushes and vote for the Trumps are the people from my hometown.
Right.
The people that the Bushes and the Trumps could give two shits about. Yeah. The people that they hate.
Well,
the poor, uneducated people of the South are flocking to these political figures, and I don't know how to tell them they hate you.
Right.
They
don't care.
They would never want to sit down and have dinner with you.
Right. See, personally, I think it's really it's both party. In this two-party system we have, that I don't think either party really gives a shit about the working class or the middle class. It's interesting because your record touches on, without just overtly saying it, but it does talk about the sort of deindustrialization of America that's gone on. And that's really sort of been this driving globalization, and NAFTA and all this stuff have been the driving factors, kicking the middle class and the working class in this country in the teeth. And that discussion is almost totally lacking in modern rock and roll or modern pop music.
100%. They'll never touch it because it's too polarizing.
Right.
Country music, there's no pop country music star that will ever stand up and say anything. The last person that really did it, the Dixie Chicks did it, and they were blackballed from country radio.
Yeah.
For making just a stance, saying, I don't agree with what this guy's saying.
Yeah.
And they were like, nope, you're off the radio for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, and that's what we're taught in politics and pop culture. It's, if you have an opinion and you're famous, half the country's going to disagree with you.
Right.
And so
it's refreshing to hear you get into that on your record.
Well, I don't have anything to lose.
Well, it makes me wonder what's the name of the city you came from? Reedsville,
yes.
Reedsville, North Carolina. What was that like growing up, because you said you're what now, 30-ish?
32, yeah.
32? So by the time you were born, I mean, that move was already well in play. But how did that change the town over the course of your... I mean, this is like beginning in the sort of the early 70s, late 60s, when the people that control capital in this country figured out, hey, wait a minute, we don't really need to pay these American workers. We can ship these jobs overseas.
Yeah. I started seeing it. My grandfather... there's a song on the record called American Tobacco Company. It's about where he worked for 42 years. You know, my grandfather got home from the war and literally went to work at a factory for minimum wage, menial work. He literally sat at a machine his entire life and watched cigarettes. Like, if you've ever smoked Lucky Strike cigarettes, made in Reidsville, North Carolina.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's like
Right.
That's like our claim to fame.
Still, or is that gone?
It stopped in the 90s. When the factory shut down. So I watched arguably the thing that put my city on the map, and it's not even on the map. It was just like the one viable piece of income that our city had. It moved. It left. Like, it's just this giant factory that sits empty now.
And it's interesting because in like the Rust Belt and in a lot of the South and a lot of these places where a lot of manufacturing was, those cities, you know, when I started touring in the mid 90s, those cities were, you know, these sort of rotting husks, you know, burned out downtowns.
I couldn't imagine seeing Cleveland or Pittsburgh in the 90s. Like,
it was tough.
I couldn't imagine, or Detroit.
A lot of those places have been reclaimed by hipsters, but you know, like how many single pour over coffee shops can really employ a town? Like, that's nice. I love that. I love that you can go get farm to table food in an old warehouse somewhere in any city in America now. I think it's great. I totally support it. But it's not a valid replacement for thousands of unionized, you know, factory jobs. It just isn't.
Exactly. And I had this conversation this morning at coffee with a friend of mine, and he was talking about why these pockets of America are seeing this resurgence. And I'm like, it's mainly because creative people have to go somewhere where they can create art. And if they're focused on creating art, they're not focused on making money.
Right.
If they're not focused on making money, they have to be able to live somewhere cheaply.
Yes.
And so if you move to a rough part of town, a bad part of town, a dangerous part of town even.
Like all of Detroit.
It's
Detroit. Apparently like the hustle bustle.
And
now,
it's amazing. Like, there's these pop-up restaurants because chefs can move to Detroit and buy entire buildings for $50,000.
Right.
Like, not rent a restaurant space, like actually own a restaurant space. And it's my town of Raleigh, where I'm from, Raleigh, North Carolina. We saw that. You know, when I moved to Raleigh in the early 2000s, nobody was downtown. We were still living in that kind of 80s mentality of, let's get away from downtown, strip malls, suburbia.
Yeah, sure.
You know, put everything closer to you. And these downtowns, every downtown in America at some point was hit.
Yeah.
Because everybody wanted strip malls and everybody wanted things closer to them and convenience. And they didn't want to go. Like, I love the idea of knowing the guy at the hardware store. Like, if I'm going to go downtown to the hardware store, there's a guy named John who literally knows everything about everything in his store.
Yeah.
I can ask him a question. And it might be $1 more, but I'm willing to pay that $1 to have that kind of, hey, I took this thing home and it didn't work. And he'd be like, oh, let me just give you one that works.
Right.
Thanks for your business. I like that.
Sure.
And that's coming back in a lot of parts of America.
Yeah.
But just in the last 10 years, I've watched Raleigh go from nobody being downtown to creatives moving in. The musicians, the artists, the people that paint the murals, the restaurants, the music venues. And you see it all over America.
Yeah.
These really great music venues in pretty sketchy, dodgy places.
I mean, dude, if you had seen downtown LA when I was a kid,
oh yeah,
I mean, you didn't go down there. You didn't go down any. It was a ghost town down there.
It was like Brooklyn. Like,
Right.
I remember my mom. She traveled for work, and in the '80s, my mom went to Brooklyn, and she was like, "It's the most dangerous place you could ever be." Like, in the late '80s, Brooklyn, New York, was like the most dangerous place you could ever be, and now it's the whitest place in America,
right. Like the hippest place in America.
It's literally like the safest place you could ever be.
Yeah.
And like every time I go there, it's just hipsterdom, you know, to a different level. I think I've seen it all, and then I'm like, whoa! I never thought.
I didn't know you could do that with a beard.
Exactly. And so, watching Raleigh go through kind of like this phase of growth, and then once you get to this pinnacle of like really cool restaurants and like bands and like everywhere you're going, you know everybody, then outsiders like, oh, that's really cool.
Right.
That what do you mean that building was built in the 1800s? This is amazing.
Yeah.
And then everybody wants to be a part of this cool thing. They move in, which raises the rent of everything. They tear down all the cool stuff and build luxury condos and high rises, and then the creatives are forced to go find something else.
Right.
And for us in North Carolina, now everybody's moving from Raleigh to Durham, which is
How far is that?
15, 20 miles.
Oh, okay.
And so it's moving into this pretty rough part of town.
Yeah.
And now it's turning into cool. Two of my band members have moved from Raleigh to Durham.
Yeah.
Just because it's cheaper and it's cooler and the food's great. And like you said, you know, there's 20 pour-over coffee places that charge $7 for a Japanese pour-over. You know, it's
hipsters are saving the world, baby.
But yeah, exactly. One latte at a time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of awesome, and it's kind of sad because it's how do we get here? It's
right.
It's why did we abandon all this stuff? And my family, like my grandpa was lucky enough to retire from the American Tobacco Company before it closed down. But my dad has sold auto parts his entire life. And, you know, I come from a place where you do what your parents do.
Right.
You know, either you take over the family business, and like my grandpa was blue collar, kept his head down, mouth shut, worked his ass off his entire life, and really didn't have much to show for it on his deathbed.
Right.
Except for bills.
Yeah.
You know, and my dad works still. My dad's born in 55, so 61 years old, you know, working his ass off.
Yeah.
50 hours a week.
Yeah.
Selling auto parts. And, you know, there's a certain point where it's like, when are you going to retire, Dad? And he's like, whenever I can.
Right.
You know, and I don't know if that's ever going to come. You know, and it's kind of it was my stance on that. It was like, as I was writing about my father and my grandfather, I realized they'd been cheated by the American dream.
Right.
The American dream teaches us that if you're a good person and you work hard and you're diligent and resilient, that you can be anything you want to be, and success will find you, and that you can carve your own little piece of this world out.
Now, you're not suggesting that that's not true. It's like that. I don't know if you've ever seen that George Carlin skit where it's called The American Dream, where I think the tagline is something like, "It's the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe."
Exactly. And this record started taking, you know, when I was creating this record, you know, it was just writing, you know, pen to paper in the chaos of everything. And then once you create this thing, you get to look back and see, like, what did I mean by that?
Right.
What did I mean by this thing? And at first it's like, oh, cool, I wrote a bunch of songs about my family.
Right.
And my friends that I grew up with. And then I realized that, like, these characters I was writing are saying something much bigger than, hey, we're from a small town. It's, hey, we're from a small town and we're pissed that we got a bad break in life and that there should be something done about it. And it's been really fun to watch this record, which is about a very, very specific town in a very specific time in a very specific place, resonate with people all over. Mm-hmm. You know, every state has that blue-collar job. In Texas and Oklahoma, it's the oil fields. You know, in Pittsburgh, it's the steel mills. In South Carolina, it's it's the paper plants.
Right.
You know, it's like everybody has that grandparent or that dad that has literally busted his ass his entire life with nothing to show for it.
Right.
And so, like, it's really cool to watch those people come up to me no matter where I go in the country and be like, I get it.
Yeah,
I know
it's the American experience.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Right now,
and that's a cool thing as a songwriter, to be able to write something that for me means something extremely personal, but also to resonate. You know, to write a story about my grandfather and just being a pissed off curmudgeon of an old man and at literally doing the same thing his entire life and nothing to show for it. Resonate with somebody that never met my grandfather.
Right.
That's a cool thing.
Totally.
That's a really neat feeling.
It's because it's really specific. I found your writing to be very specific.
For sure. And a lot of time when I first started writing songs, I thought that I was too detailed.
Right.
I thought that, oh man, you can't.
That's the good stuff that does resonate. It's the vague stuff that I feel like doesn't resonate.
Yeah, like for the song on the record, there's a song called "Unfortunate Kind," and I wrote a song about this couple that one of them is battling dementia and forgets her husband, and like it starts off as this really kind of setting up their story. And like, my parents aren't going through dementia. Right. You know, my parents aren't losing their mind or anything. But I wanted to write this song, and to make it seem real to me, I had to add real elements of my parents' life.
Right.
To be able to tell that story and me be like, I can tell this story and feel good about it. So like, there's lines about like, the first week this couple was married, she burned a pecan pie.
I love that line.
And the husband ate it begrudgingly and didn't complain about it. That's a story my parents tell all the time. The first week my parents were married.
You couldn't stand to see her cry. I
Yeah,
remember that from listening to it. Yeah,
exactly.
It sticks with you.
It's one of those lines. It's a real human moment. Like the first week my parents were married, my mom wanted to cook my dad his favorite meal, so she called my grandmother and said, "What is his favorite meal?" And she said, "He loves turnips, just not turnip greens, just the root vegetable mashed up, butter, salt,
Right.
turnips." So my mom cooked them and just butchered it, like absolute a massacre in the kitchen.
Right.
And my dad still tells it. He came home and like he started eating it, and she could tell that like it was terrible.
Right.
And she just got up and ran to the bedroom and started crying. And like he came back and he's like, "No, they're delicious." And he asked for seconds and thirds.
Wow.
And it's one of those real human moments that I was able to put into a fictional song
Right.
and make the song real, make the song feel lived in. You know, the song talks about that this couple's been married 39 years. That's how long my parents have been married. So every night I get to sing this song, and there's parts of the song that aren't fake to me.
Right.
There's parts of the song that are like,
Sure.
this is a real thing.
That's interesting because you even though these aren't autobiographical, you still creep into the songs.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Your experience, your family's experience, your friend's experience, whatever it is.
It's absolutely inevitable. And I think that my favorite writers growing up were able to put pieces of themselves in these songs. My favorite songs have always been story songs. I was raised on country music. I love 3 verses that tell a story, a bridge that brings it all back together, and a chorus that just you can sing along to. Exactly. And that's the kind of stuff I was raised on. And then when I got old enough to really dig into songwriting was when I was in college. I ran a record store in Raleigh for 5 years. And, you know, I ran the kind of Americana alt country type part of our store.
Yeah.
And I remember every day I just got to put on 5 or 6 records I'd never heard and listen to them. And that's how I fell in love with the Springsteens of the world and the Guy Clarks and the Towns Van Zants. And the people that they're not going to play you on country radio, but the people that just tell these brilliant, brilliant stories in 4 minutes. Yeah. Like literally make you question your entire life in 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that's all I ever try to do is write something that sticks in 4 minutes.
Right.
You know.
Well, that's great. I mean, it really comes through in your writing because I was listening to some of your older records too, and that's that's you as a writer.
Oh, it's very specific, and early on it blew my mind that people were relating to songs because I put a lot of myself into them.
Yeah,
like very autobiographical, very like almost too honest. Like the guy who's like, "Tell me something about yourself," and then I talk for 45 minutes about like too much.
Yeah. I don't need to know all that.
I feel like some of my songwriting is like too much information, but then as people come up to me after shows and they're like, that one line that I thought was way too personal, it's like that's the line that got me. Yeah. That's the line that like just pulled me in, and so I've learned how to kind of cut that off, that kind of worry about being too honest and just kind of writing what I feel and writing what I know. And luckily, 10 years in, people were getting it,
So what is this, like your 7th or 8th record? How many American Aquarium records?
It's my eighth record.
8th record.
Yeah.
How has your approach to recording evolved over the years? Because I read that you recorded this one really fast, like just you wrote it in a couple of days, you recorded the whole thing in a couple of days too, right?
I got home, I sat on it for 2 months, and then I met the band that played on the record. I met them one day. We rehearsed for 2 days. We recorded in 2 days. We mixed
the whole thing.
Whole thing.
Wow. Did you record live?
Live. My favorite thing about this record is if you pull up the Pro Tools, not one comp.
Really?
The entire time, straight through.
Wow.
Not one comp. Every vocal take you hear was sang to the drums, the bass, the lead instrument.
Really? You didn't even go back and fix vocals?
We didn't fix vocals. Everything you hear is one take that was recorded. We were in one room recording everything.
Click track or no click track?
Click track.
Okay.
Drummer had to click.
Okay.
I didn't have it in my ears.
Right. Yeah.
Drummer had to click though.
That's amazing.
Wait a minute. Half and half.
Okay.
Some of the songs had to click. Some of the songs didn't.
Yeah.
We wanted to catch like this real thing.
Yeah.
And we gave up some of the shine, some of the polish, some of the perfection for something that sounded real, because the songs were too real to church up too much.
Right. Yeah.
Because at first I wanted to do like this really acoustic record, like me, an acoustic guitar and a harmonica, and
right. Just bare bones.
This is a folk record.
Yeah.
And then we put a band on it, but the ultimate goal was to have a band that didn't sound like a band. To have a band, that was a 5-piece band playing, and we wanted it to be so understated that you would look up and think, oh wait, there's drums there.
Right.
Like there's bass. Like this is a full band, but the songs are out front, the vocals are out front, the story's out front, and everything else was secondary.
Right.
The main question recording this record was, does what we're playing get in the way of the story? If no, it sticks. If it did, it went. And to this day, I'm still so proud. It's the first record I've ever made with 0 comps.
Right.
There was a couple overdubs, lead instruments and stuff. Like we brought in like a fiddle player for one song, brought in an accordion for a couple songs.
Right.
But the base of everything you hear, no comps, just all 2 days, 10-hour days.
That's great. I mean, it's interesting that you said you wanted to make it sound like it wasn't a band, because it really does sound like, and it's also interesting to hear that you guys had just met to make the record or whatever, because it sounds like you guys are really comfortable playing together and playing off each other.
It was really great because the producer put the band together. And so
who's the producer?
Brad Cook. He used to be in this band called Megafaun.
Okay.
He plays with this band called His Golden Messenger right now. Really, really great collective of musicians in the Durham area.
Right.
And he basically just called up a bunch of really great pros.
Right.
And was like, hey, we're going to make this folk record. And we showed up. Like I said, the coolest part was met them on a Monday, practiced Tuesday and Wednesday, Thursday and Friday we tracked it, Saturday we mixed it, Sunday we mastered it. In less than a week, I went from meeting a band to having a master in my hand to turn into my manager.
I mean, there's really something to be said for sort of the seat of your pants and not overthinking things.
It was awesome.
As you're recording, yeah.
Because looking back, obviously, every musician's going to nitpick what they do, and I'm like, because it's
hard to get out of your own way with that a lot of the time.
For sure. For me, it was I've taken this on the road, and the songs have changed a little bit on the road, and the way I sing them, and I listen back to the record. I'm like,
have you been touring a lot this year?
I just did
because the album just came out a month ago?
Yeah, about a month ago. It came out the 20th.
Yeah.
So a month ago. And we did a little 2-week run through the South, and I'm going to do another week here, a week there. But for the most part, we just wanted to put it out, tour a little bit. American Aquarium's like the main focus,
right? And
we're still touring pretty heavy into the end of the year.
Was there any animosity with your band? Like, hey, why are you doing that? We're supposed to be doing that.
No, they supported it,
right? Because some of those guys are playing with you, right?
Yeah, 2 of the guys are playing with me, and it's one of those things. When you're a band that plays 300 shows a year,
probably
if you look to anybody in the band and say, "Hey, would you like another 2 weeks off?"
Right?
They're like, "Yes."
Yeah.
Cool. So for me, this year's been pretty busy and hectic for me.
Yeah.
Because anytime the band's not touring, I squeeze a solo run in, whether it be a week or 2 weeks or whatever.
And aren't you guys getting ready to make a new album in the fall?
We start recording in the fall.
Cool.
For the next American Aquarium.
Is that already written?
Partially.
Right.
Kicking around a bunch of ideas. Some songs are done. Nothing's finalized.
Right.
But we got a bunch of great ideas. And for us, it's about just taking time off the road, sitting down, creating.
Yeah.
We've always been pretty good at that.
Is it something, is the sort of the songwriting process, or at least like the arranging process, kind of a democratic band thing?
The arrangement process is 100% like a collaborative effort. So my process is I write all the songs, and they're really, the skeleton of the song is just, 3-chord folk songs.
Yeah.
And I bring them to the band with like a definitive melody and kind of where I want the chord progression to go.
Yeah.
And they church it up. They make it musically interesting.
Right.
Because if a guy puts out 8 records of just 3-chord folk songs, it gets really monotonous. Even I wouldn't want to hear that.
Right.
And I love 3-chord folk songs. So they kind of make it this. It's really neat because it's like running it through 6 different filters. And so if anybody comes up with an idea, it literally has to pass through 6 okays for it to stick.
Right.
Or else we augment it some way to where that other person's happy.
Yeah, sure.
And so the ultimate goal is to make, because when I listen to a record, the first thing I hear is the lyrics. I don't hear the music.
Right.
Some of my favorite songwriters are absolutely horrific musicians.
Right.
And their bands are pretty bad.
Yeah.
But if they have something to say, that's the shining light for me.
Sure.
I can put everything else on hold and listen to somebody say something.
And the opposite is true too, where they could be like a really great band, but if there's nothing to hang your hat on lyrically, it's kind of like,
Yeah, and so like the boys listen to music, and so they're playing a lot of stuff in the van. I'm like, this guy, like what he's saying this is terrible.
Yeah.
And they're like, but listen to this part, or listen. 2 of the guys like run a studio back home, and so like the sonic vibe
Right.
is what they're constantly chasing. It's like
Sure.
the vibe dragon.
Yeah.
Is something they're constantly chasing.
Yeah.
And so when we make records, it's a conscious choice or effort to make something that musically is interesting, but also says something.
Yeah.
Our favorite bands that we all agree on do that. You know,
Sure.
the Springsteens, the Tom Pettys.
Yeah.
You know, great songwriters, great band is exactly what we want. It was what we all strive to do, is make something that musically we can be like, that's cool, and then be like, oh, what you're saying is pretty cool too.
And didn't Jason Isbell produce one of your records?
Yeah, Jason.
How did you connect with him?
So when Jason left the Truckers back
Right.
in like 2006, 2007, we started doing some shows with him and his new band, the 400 Unit, and just remained friends. And this is back when he was drinking. This is back when I was drinking. Darker times.
Yeah.
And anytime we were in the same town, we'd meet up, have beers,
Yeah.
and it always came up, you know, when are you gonna let me do a record? When are you gonna let me produce one of y'all's records? And so finally, it was.
I imagine he was somebody that you were already a fan of his music.
Huge fan of.
So,
like, I was a big fan of the Drive-By Truckers early
Sure.
on.
Yeah.
And so what I found out was I was even more fan of Jason's part of the Drive-By Truckers.
Right.
I was a big fan of Jason's songs.
How was that to work with him though, where he's in the studio with you?
It was amazing.
Because I know sometimes, you know, when you're working with somebody who you admire a lot, it's hard to be honest about ideas, and that's
We tried to treat him like a seventh member of the band.
Really?
And if there was something that we didn't like, we were just like, man, I don't think it's going to work.
Right.
You know, and then there's plenty of times. Luckily, Jason's one of those guys that's so talented, and just a student of songs constantly. You take what he's saying. You know, it's not like my guitar player making a like, hey, maybe you should change this.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh,
Right.
Jason.
There's a weight to it.
There's a
Yeah,
weight
yeah.
that is carried there. But it was one of those things where if he heard a slide part, it was nothing for him to just be like, hey, punch me in.
Yeah,
And
check
he'd run
this out.
in and
Yeah.
throw the Duesenberg on and
Phenomenal
and
guitar
play
player, that guy.
Man, it's not fair. You know, there's
You got that voice, you can sing, you play guitar like that, and you write those songs? Come on.
yeah, there's three things. There's guitar playing, there's songwriting, and there's singing. And usually everybody has, the really good ones have two.
Right.
Really good ones can do two of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, the average ones can do one and somebody else can pick up the slack. But when you have someone like that can do all three,
Yeah.
it's not fair.
Yeah.
You know, like your typical singer-songwriters aren't guitar shredders.
Right.
And, you know, so it was really nice to have him in the studio because he would go in and lay down a piano part or lay down a slide part. And, you know, our pedal steel player was just like, oh, no, he nailed it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go get some
Yeah,
coffee.
leave that right
I'll
where
get
it
some
is.
coffee. So it was cool to go down to Muscle Shoals for a couple weeks and make a record down there with Jason before he was Jason.
Right.
You know, because at that point in time, he was just our buddy, Jason.
Yeah.
He used to be in this band, and now he's doing the solo thing, and
Sure.
he's a great songwriter, and, you know, but he wasn't mainstream.
Right.
He wasn't winning Grammys.
Yeah.
You know, he was
Yeah, yeah.
he was just like a songwriter.
Sure.
He was one of those guys that every one of my songwriting friends knew who Jason Isbell was.
Right.
But if I tried to tell, you know, a lot of people who didn't listen to the underground indie Americana scene,
Yeah.
they'd be like, who's Jason Isbell? Oh, who's that
Sure.
guy in the Truckers? Cool, I love the Truckers.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was really cool to right after that record came out, he got sober and got married.
Right.
And I was at his wedding, and, you know, it's really, really great to watch a friend make that life decision
Yeah.
that immediately alters everything. Like,
It's a big change.
he was literally giving the world a handicap. Like, him drinking was like letting everyone else keep up with him.
Right.
When
yeah.
he stopped drinking, it was just like, okay,
Overdrive, yeah.
it was like an Olympic runner like actually trying.
Yeah.
You know, he was
Yeah.
like, oh no, why am I back here? Like, I can be up at the front.
Yeah.
And it literally, like, when he got sober, a switch flipped.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard Southeastern, I told the boys, is like,
Yeah.
Jason's getting ready to be like a
Yeah.
household
That guy's,
name.
he's gone.
Yeah, he's but we hung out with him yesterday at
Oh, really?
at Kaboo.
Oh, cool.
Jason's one of the few friends that I've had that fame has not changed him one bit. A lot of
good.
friends get famous or get successful. I'm not gonna say famous because
Yeah.
in the Americana world, I don't know how famous you can really get.
Yeah, yeah.
But as far as successful goes, as far as Jason Isbell is like one of the songwriters of our generation.
Yeah.
You know, he's the John Prine of my generation. Like 30
Yeah.
years from now, people are going to be doing Jason Isbell covers,
Absolutely. And tribute records and all the
tribute
rest of it.
records and
Yeah,
stuff
sure.
like that. And it's really neat to watch a friend like that who gets that big that still, if I text him and I'm in town, he texts me back and says, yeah, let's meet up and get a coffee, or let's come on the bus, hang out. It's
Cool.
It's a neat thing. And, you know, nobody deserves success more than him. And it was really nice because we had a record that he produced, and then he got sober and got really successful. And a lot of people found our band through Isbell.
Right.
Through him
Right.
tweeting about us. And, you know, it's funny how that works, how, you know, if somebody gets successful, the super fans dig back and
Sure.
what's anything he's touched?
Yeah.
Oh, he produced
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one record.
I mean, I did that when I was a guy. I still do that.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm that guy. If I love something, I trace it
wanna
back
check
to
it
the.
all.
I trace it back
What
to
was
the
that
root.
guy listening to? Who was he hanging out with?
I'm the king of like going back and reading
Yeah.
the interviews and reading like
Yeah.
what were they listening to when they made this record, and what influenced this, and then going back and finding that and being like,
Yeah.
oh wow, because the record store guy in me always wants to go back to the source.
Sure.
Where's the source of this? Where okay,
And
obviously
now it's so easy. You just, it's a click away.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm the guy that reads the liner notes. I want to know who played that, you know, tin whistle on track 3 in the background of the third verse. You know,
Yeah,
it's like,
sure.
oh wow, that's really neat. He
Yeah.
also played on this one record.
I always say it'd be great if you could just take all that information out of your brain and put in like, actually like how to be a brain surgeon, or
Oh,
US
yeah.
history or anything.
Yeah.
Like I studied AC/DC records and the liner notes and who did what. Like it was like
Oh, if I could have learned like Algebra 2 the way the way I studied, those early Springsteen records.
Yeah, totally.
It's one of those things where like when I fall in love with something, I fall hard.
Yeah,
And music is no different.
Sure.
It was the minute I fell in love with the art of songwriting, I wanted to see how many different angles you could approach. Because everybody's going to write love songs.
Right.
And everybody's going to write road songs. And everybody's going to write heartbreak songs or, happy songs. I like seeing how many different angles you can come at that one topic. Because you strip it down to one of the 3 or 4 basic things you're writing a song about. I want to know how you're different getting to that point. If you're going to write a love song,
sure.
What's different about that love song?
Right.
And there's a lot of dudes that do really cool things with it.
There's a lot of different ways to a lot of different angles to come at any of those things from.
100%. And the people that come at it from the most original angles tend to be my favorite.
Yeah.
But
God damn it! How do you do that?
saying something different, saying something like, man, like the classic, I wish I'd have wrote that down. Like
Yeah.
I've had that thought before, but he said it way better.
But he had the discipline to flesh it out.
Exactly. And that's my favorite kind of stuff is just being a student of songwriting.
Yeah.
And trying to be better and trying to come up with newer ways of saying stuff. With this record, it's instead of cramming my political beliefs down people's throat, presenting an idea to them in a relatable vessel.
Yeah.
We've all, like, anybody who wasn't born in LA or New York or Chicago is from a small town.
Yeah.
That might have moved to a big town, but most people are from a small town, and most people, it resonates with them when you talk about the hardships of just getting to that next step on the ladder. And some people never
or
get
even
to that.
just treading water.
Exactly, just keeping your head above water.
Yeah.
And people relate to that.
Yeah.
There's everybody, successful or not, has worked the shitty job.
Yeah.
That made you want to get out of there, and some people get out. And at this point in my life, I'm learning that sometimes it's just luck, because there's plenty of guys that work their ass off on the road, musicians,
Oh yeah.
that are doing just as many shows as I am a year and aren't getting the breaks.
Yeah.
There's something's not going right.
Right.
And it's not the talent.
Yeah.
Because you'll go see them and be like, wow, why aren't these people?
It's hard in music, man. It's like it's you got to have the hard work and you got to have the good song or whatever it is, or the talent, but you also got to be in the right place at the right time.
Luck,
and that's
man.
the X factor that you can't plan, or like nothing. You're never gonna. You just have to be in the right place at the right time.
For sure. And it used to be all you needed was one of those lucky breaks.
Right.
Now you need a combination of lucky breaks.
Right.
Now you need like 6 or 7 lucky breaks in a row that
Yeah.
can add to this thing taking off, because at a certain point, musically, we're all on the same page. We're all talented.
Right.
There's a level of people, it's like, oh, wow, he's a great guitar player, he's a great songwriter.
Yeah.
The thing I think that separates people is work and luck, break,
Right.
getting
Yeah.
a break,
Yeah.
and
And selling out, bro. Come on.
and writing a Coke commercial.
There you go.
But it's one of those things where, like, for us, we were never going to let the hard work be the thing that stopped us.
Right.
The breaks may come.
And clearly, that has not been an issue for you with doing 300 shows a year.
Yeah, and we've learned how to do it. So when we don't do it, it's weird.
Right.
Like when we don't play 300 shows a year, it's weird. And so when there's two factors of being a successful musician, hard work and luck, and you take one of them out, or you guarantee one of them's going to be there.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for the break. You're waiting for somebody to hear your song and say, he's got something.
Yeah.
And for us, that might be a guy that owns a nicer rock club in town being like, man, you guys shouldn't be playing here. You should be playing like my nicer club. I have a green room. I'll give you a deli tray.
Nowadays, it's somebody putting your song in a movie or whatever, getting a sync or whatever.
For sure.
Whatever it is.
The classic Spotify playlist,
Yes.
60,000 people listening to your song can help you out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people sit back and bitch about the state of the music business. Instead of bitching, we just went out and tried to adapt.
Right.
Would I much rather people buy my records, or much rather play 100 shows a year and get paid a lot more money and be signed to a record deal and not have to worry about how I'm going to afford to make the record? Yeah, of course. But that's not possible now.
Right.
And so the question we had to ask ourselves is that going to stand in the way of us, or are we going to find a way around it? And me and the boys were just like, head down, straight ahead, man.
Get to work.
Get to work. And if you get to work, that's the one thing I tell kids. What can you tell my son about being a musician? Are you willing to give up everything you love for 10 years?
Yeah.
If you even have to think about it, don't do it. Be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Go work at a bank.
Yeah, I always say, dude, there were a lot of guys that were a lot better guitar players than I was growing up, but there's a lot better bands than us, but it's a war of attrition. Yes.
Can I outlast that person that's better than me?
Yeah.
And what I've learned is there's a lot of great bands that broke up because they couldn't take it.
Yeah.
The hardship was too much. It wasn't easy enough.
Yeah, sure.
And for a stubborn asshole like me, it not being easy enough, I don't look at that as a detriment to me. I look at it as a detriment to everybody else who has got to go up against me.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, oh, if this other band broke up, it's like, well, maybe we'll get that spot at the festival they had this year.
That's good for us.
Just sticking with it and keeping your head down and working hard. And there's kids out there, to kind of come full circle about what we talked about earlier, there's kids out there that look at it, and it's a daunting thing to look at, especially from the very start. If I had to go back and do it again, knowing what I know, that's a hard tunnel to look down.
Yeah, and it's harder now than even when you started.
Yeah, when I started in 2006, when I set up our first MySpace page, it was like, guys, 2 years tops, we're going to be
on top of the
huge,
world.
man.
Yeah.
It's hard work and just a part of just sheer ignorance.
Right.
It's about looking at this giant abyss and just jumping off the edge and being like, it can't be that far down.
Right.
And
then 10 years later, you're like, we still haven't hit the bottom.
We still haven't hit the bottom. It's one of those things, the ladders of success. When you get to the next rung, you realize that 20 more rungs existed above you that you had no idea existed.
Sure.
And so it's just, you got to be dumb enough to do it, and you've also got to be talented enough to do it. But really, you just have to be stubborn.
Yeah.
You can't take 99 people will tell you no for your first gig, and then there's going to be that one guy that's like, I hear something.
Right.
Or maybe you can sell me more beer than I could if you weren't playing.
Right.
And then trying to take advantage of that and use it as momentum, and it's hard. It's a weird way to earn a living.
Yeah.
But
it's like being a carny, really.
It really is.
Yeah. That's what I always tell people.
There's people, when me and my wife first met, and we started dating and getting serious, she used to always look at what I did as like a vacation. She's like, you're on tour again? Right. Oh, rough life.
Yeah.
And I was like, before she moved to Raleigh with me, I was like, you're going to go on the road with me for 2 months. You're going to live in the van with me and the boys for 2 months.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I want you to do. She's like, vacation, of
Easy
course.
breezy.
Get to see the country. After like 2 months, she was like, I'll never say that this is not work.
Right.
She's like, I'll never once question. She's like, what you do is insane.
Have you ever read the book, one of the Louvin brothers, the one that lived until a couple of years ago?
Is that Charlie?
I think it was Charlie.
Charlie.
Yes, because Ira's the one that died.
Because I went and saw Charlie a couple years ago.
Yeah, he wrote a great memoir before he died. I think it might have come out right before he died or right after he died. It's only, 2-3 years old. And he tells a story about that, how his dad thought that they were just candy ass, oh, you musicians. And his dad was like, like a fucking dirt farmer or something. He had a real hard scrabble guy.
Exactly.
And just thought, oh, you and your brother, you just have this cush job. And, touring back then was like, a lot harder than even like van tours where they're just in a car and it was just the two of them. And they're like having to take speed to go over and drive over there,
exactly.
just to make it to the next show and like bathe in the creek outside of the church that they're playing, whatever, like it was rough. And so they took their dad out for, I forget how long, I think it was only maybe a week or even a weekend or something. And their dad was so frazzled that he never gave him a hard time again.
Yeah,
after that.
my dad didn't get it for a very, very long time. And he didn't come to shows. My brother graduated high school, started managing like a car dealership and works with cars.
Yeah.
And honest living.
Yeah.
And for me, my dad thought I was just trying to find an excuse not to work.
Right.
He was like,
instead of recognizing it as work.
Yeah, he was like, what are you running from? And he didn't look at it as what am I running to?
Right.
And I'll never forget, it was probably 4 years ago, my dad came to a show. It was like a CD release show in Raleigh. We had like 2 sold out nights at like the Lincoln Theater. My dad came and like I got him like a little VIP box at the top of the theater.
Yeah.
And he watched as like 2,000 people sang every word to every song.
Yeah.
And after the show, he'd come up to me like tears in his eyes. And he was just like, all he said was, I get it. And we've never had a conversation since then about what I do for a living. But those words, like that's how I knew that like I was okay in the music world, is my dad understood. He finally got like, because for the longest time,
this is real.
For the longest time, he couldn't wrap his head around people are willing to pay money to see you talk about your feelings. Like,
what kind of job is that?
I had to listen to your feelings for 18 years, and I'm really glad you moved out. I would have never paid for it.
Yeah.
And it's really neat to kind of see that come full circle, and when your parents or your wife or anybody realizes like this isn't the cushiest gig.
Right.
If it had been the 90s and we'd have been a band and we got signed after our first show and we got put on a bus and got to go on tour with the big band in the world, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist anymore.
But that ain't
and if it does happen, it's like the unicorn.
Right.
And the ascension to the top, if it's quick, it's also quick to the bottom.
Yeah, sure.
Back to obscurity. And so for us, we look at it as every year is just another brick on that foundation.
Yeah.
And the more,
the more you can do it without the mainstream support system, probably the stronger in the long run your band will be.
We've never been on a label. We pay for all our records ourselves, but in the end of it, we see all the profit from any records we sell.
Right.
And the iTunes money and the Spotify money or whatever. And that's what keeps us alive. And it's kind of funny, because a lot of people, when you tell them that, they don't want to be musicians anymore. It's like, it's that much work? Yeah. I thought all you had to do is like write a couple songs and get famous.
Get them on the radio.
And so for us, it's like, it's about meeting our fans, and we're very vocal about that. You know, we have 40,000 fans on Facebook or whatever. I guarantee you, I've shook like 35,000 on his hand and put a CD in it and said, thanks for coming out to see us live. And that's the new business model.
Right.
Is caring about the people that come to see you.
Yeah.
And knowing their name, or at least knowing their face, and being like, oh, you were in Kentucky 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
And they're a part of something at that point.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where if you build a strong foundation, we might not ever be in a bus. We might not ever be on the mega world tour. But I get to play songs every night and earn a living. Yeah. And, pay my bills on time, take my wife out somewhere fancy to eat on her anniversary. That's success for me. Is being able to keep my head above water and having a little bit of extra money. And our fan base is what built that. And so like a lot of people don't get that these days, is there's still bands that literally are nobody that won't go out and talk to fans. Yeah. Won't go out and shake hands. And to this day, we play Raleigh. We play in front of thousands of people. And I stand there for 2 hours after every show. Sign, shake hands. Because I care. I want to meet them. Yeah. That's the thing is caring about who gets you to where you are. And don't get me wrong, we're in the middle of the road. We're not the broke musicians anymore, but we're not the extremely successful. We're the workers, the worker bees.
Jack Ingram said, I think it was his outgoing message on his voicemail or whatever, said something like, taking the music to the people.
Exactly.
That's it.
It's not that, Woody Guthrie was great at it. Yeah. It's about singing songs that people relate to and meaning them. Yeah. Being a real human being. And a lot of times, don't get me wrong, like I make my favorite people like these giant myths of humans, but they're humans. Yeah. They're people that get up every day and put their shoes on and go get a cup of coffee and like things and don't like things. And when you realize that, like it's humanizing people is a good thing. Sure. And so that's what I always try to do, especially with our fans, is just humanize it. Is be a good person, be nice, shake hands, take pictures.
Even when you're grumpy and you didn't get your coffee that day and you just drove 900 miles. Sometimes it's
hard.
It's hard.
It's hard to explain to people. It's like, I drove 10 hours to be here and play. Like, people don't understand that, like, our job sucks except for that hour and a half we're on stage.
Yeah.
It's like everything else is the hurry up and wait game.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't understand that I've been at this venue since 2:00 loading in, then I sound checked, and then I walked to whatever restaurant was within a mile of here to eat either a really great, like surprisingly great meal or a terrible, or a Popeyes. And then I came back and I sat through a local opener that I absolutely loathed.
Right.
And then I got on stage, and that one moment on stage where you're an hour and a half where you get to tune everybody out and kind of you and your 5 friends get to do what you love doing. I was like, that's why we do it.
Yeah.
I was like, we don't do it.
It's funny, dude. I was at that Riot Fest in Chicago on Sunday with Chevy Metal, the cover band thing I was telling you about. And
it's called Chevy Metal.
It's called Chevy Metal.
Oh,
yeah,
that's great.
Our drummer Taylor's been doing it for years. Yeah. So we're setting up, and we go bare bones. We have like one of our buddies comes with us, but it's not like we have like guitar techs and everything. You're just using kind of crappy rental gear. And it's really just throw and go. And so you go up there and you're just dealing with the monitor guy that you don't know. And most of the time, you know, the local crew dudes and local monitor guys are nice and it all goes smoothly. But Sunday, the guy was just a fucking dick. And he was terrible at his job. And it was not fun just trying to get your vocal turned on in your monitor, which is fucking easy for the motherfucker, but he's just going to be a dick about it. Yeah. Whatever. So he did his thing, you know, and I was up there for like, you know, 10 minutes and there's a crowd of people and we're trying to kind of like set up and I was getting frustrated and I was getting into that headspace like, fuck this motherfucker. And then, you know, and I could feel myself going into that thing of starting to be an asshole.
Yeah.
And then I was like, looked out at the crowd and then we started playing and my guitar's a little bit out of tune. It sounded really bad. And I was like the first like 30 seconds of the first song, I was going into that mind space like, fuck this. I don't want to fucking be here. This motherfucker's making it sound shitty on purpose. And I had to real quickly tune myself up and look out, and there's just a sea of fucking smiling faces. And people just want to have a good time.
Yeah.
And they're there to see you, and they're rooting for you, and they don't care. They don't want to know about this guy over here being an asshole. Like, it doesn't matter. Those are the moments, like, and I'm not saying that's like as hard as like fucking digging a ditch or whatever for a living, but those are the moments that you have to like remind yourself how fucking special what you do is. And just game up and go like, okay, I don't care. Who cares if it sounds like shit? We're gonna have fun. We're gonna turn this into a party. Doesn't matter.
Just as much as it's our fun time to turn our brain off and do something that we love doing, they're turning their brain off too.
Yeah.
It's music is like the one thing that you get to go and be a part of something.
Yeah.
You get to go and pay your $20, $25, $100, whatever you pay to get into your show. And you get to turn your brain off and you get to be a part of something giant. And if you're lucky, you get to be part of something really cool and big. Yeah. Like those moments where like everybody's on this kind of same plane and everybody's singing along and everybody's smiling and everybody's looking at each other like we're here.
Yeah.
Like even if for a minute we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
This is so rad. Because you look out in the crowd and you'll see rednecks, you'll see punk rock kids, you'll see frat boys, you'll see guys, girls, old people, young people. And when everybody's on that same thing, hands around each other, like singing along to their favorites, that's why you do it.
Yeah.
You don't do it for any other reason than that one moment. Don't get me wrong. At a certain point, the money's cool. Yeah. At a certain point, you know, at a certain point, a lot of cool things come with being a musician.
Sure.
But that will always be the constant. From the first time it happened, in the first club show ever played, to the most recent one. You know, and there'll be more where you're operating on this really cool plane and everybody gets it.
It's the best.
I wish you could bottle it up and sell it, man.
Yeah. On that tip, would you like to play a song?
Yeah, that'd be rad.
That would be great.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me reconfigure this.
Do you want me to intro the song or anything?
Sure.
This is a song called Unfortunate Kind. It was a good time, just a bad decision. We were all ramped up with the best intentions. You were out of my league, and I was running out of time to string together words that were gonna make you mine. Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how every now and then the unfortunate kind get lucky sometimes. "39 years you've been putting up with me. Yeah, folks said we'd never see our first anniversary. Do you remember that first week when you burnt that pecan pie? And I ate the whole damn thing, I couldn't stand to see you cry. Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how every now and then the unfortunate kind get lucky sometimes? Then you got sick and things just weren't the same. There were days I'd come to visit, you didn't even know my name. Then I watched you fade away while I was holding tight to you, until the nurses pulled me back and said there's nothing you can do. Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how every now and then the unfortunate kind get lucky sometimes? It's been 2 years to the day since you left me here alone. Most days I sit there in the kitchen waiting for you to come home. Yeah, I'm still haunted by your ghost. I still sleep in our old bed. I just lay there on the couch thinking about the words you said. Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how it all works out? Ain't it funny how every now and then the unfortunate kind get lucky sometimes?
Oh yeah.
Solid.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for having me in.
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks for
it.
coming today.
No worries, man.
My fingers to the bone, just to have a little bit of something I can call my own.
All right, that was BJ Barham on Walking the Floor, doing a cool acoustic version of Unfortunate Kind from his solo record, Rockingham. Now, you can check in on BJ Barham at bjbarham.com or find him on Twitter at bjbarhamtweets. I don't know if he's touring much for that record because I did notice that American Aquarium just put out a new live record. If he's not touring with American Aquarium, then he's probably out on his own or vice versa. Who knows? Check in with them at americanaquarium.com, or you can find them on Twitter at USAquarium. Hardest working man in show business that I've interviewed recently, BJ Barham. Now make sure you get over there to the iTunes store and subscribe to Walking the Floor. Check out all our past episodes. Get on over to zounds.com. Do what you gotta do, and we'll see you in a week. This is Chris Shiflett signing off. Adios, amigos!
Adios, amigos!
Not to look back, just stare up at that smokestack and my troubles fade away.